Hi, welcome to my channel where we provide an alternative view to the common narrative. Today I'm going to talk about Prigoshan's outburst a couple of weeks back. I know it's a little bit late. I did make a video, and when I edited I found out that voice was never recorded. So effectively I have to redo it. But still, I believe I have an opinion on this matter. So if you are interested on it, please continue watching. Hi, welcome back to the channel. Well, you probably have heard about the PMC Wagner Group and the head of this private military company is Prigoshan, and Prigoshan or the Wagner Group is very active in the Bakhmut area. And basically, they have been fighting there for the last 10 months. Until recently, Prigozhin is an outspoken person. He does use social media to express sometimes his frustration with the Russian military command and the MOD. But the last one that he has done about 2 weeks ago was quite severe. We physically or specifically addressed Shoguns and Gerasimov for and blamed them for the death of some of the Wagner soldiers. And he was going on, and then he basically in the background he showed about 35 fallen Wagner soldiers that have died. And you can see basically he was very upset. And then he accused the Russian military of a lack of artillery and ammunition, etc., etc., and basically blamed them for the death of these soldiers. Now, from a psychological point of view, one can stand a little bit back and try to analyze the reaction. And if I have to do that, then basically what I would say is that Prigozhin is not a person, although it's a private military company, Prigozhin is not a person that sits in his office in Moscow, but he's on the front itself, between his men. And the lives of his men are fairly important to him. He's unfortunately not a military commander or has any military experience. And apparently he was a cook for Putin or chef, whatever you want to call him. And basically that is his background until he moved into the private military industry. So from a military point of view, he has no experience, and he also doesn't have the necessary discipline that goes with it. But as I've stated before, the Bakhmut conflict, where it seems to me where the Wagner Group has been active for about 10 months, and even maybe more. And one has to ask yourself, what are they trying to achieve there? If one looks at the rest of the military front, the military Russian or the conflict lines are fairly stable and quiet, except for some intermediate battles for position or for strategic purposes for some other future type of offense or so, something like that. But in Bakhmut, it has been actively being fighting, day to day, week after week, month after month. And we've all been told that the Bakhmut area is a heavily fortified area, and it would be very difficult to conquer, or to conquer. Now, just from this perspective of the 10 months of fighting, and the psychological effect that it has on Prigozhin and his troops is quite severe. So he is under pressure. And what I believe had that happened at that day is that They were advancing, or they tried to advance, and then for some or other reason, he requested artillery fire or some other ammunition that is required. And that failed to realize, and unfortunately, in that specific moment, at that specific time, at that specific position, his men suffered unnecessary death and casualties. And nobody wants to accept unnecessary death or casualties in any situation because of an error that somebody else has made. And I believe that is what cracked Prigoshan. And that is forced him to make a certain statement. In other statements, Prigoshan has usually said that they have about casualties on a good day of about 20 per day, and on a very bad day about 50 a day. Now, these 35 days are in the middle of that, so it's not something out of the ordinary, but I believe he believes it was totally unnecessary, and that is what triggered him, together with the pressure that goes with it. But I just would like to point out that the Wagner Group is not the only private military group. There are some, there is some estimates that there are between 10 and 20 other private military organizations. Some of them are called Prigoshan had actually mentioned a PMC Nevsky and PMC Stream, which apparently are Gazprom's private military company, who are supposed to cover the Wagner tanks in Bakhmut. There's also the PMC Wolves and the PMC Patriots that are alleged to be the private PMC group of Shoigu, etc., etc. So it's quite amazing that there are so many private military organizations active on the front. But the question is that the point here is not, is it really that type of amazing? See, the problem is we don't know what the Russian culture is. We have some idea, but do we really know? Now, I've scanned the Russian, I've seen commentates and articles by Russians themselves living in Russia, and none of them actually discuss the function of these private military and the Wagner Group, and they don't even know how these groups are integrated in the Russian army and who commands them. And there is big speculations on how the Russian military can allow this outburst of Prigozhin with no consequences. I mean, if you even look at Kardov, from the Chechen leader, he expressed on social media Prigozhin's outburst, and told him not to wash his clothes basically effectively in the open, and I had to discuss it with the leadership. But still, there's you don't see this type of outbursts being tolerated in any Western or any other military structure. And if the Russian military structure is still based on the Soviet Union, which is strict, top down, then, it quite amazes me. But nobody can explain it. So what I therefore have to do, deduct from this behavior from the Russian command and Putin and Sogoi and Gerasimov and so on, is that these groups have a place and a function in the military structure. They are private, so they are not fully subject to the Russian command. So there must be some legal aspects that prevents the Russian command to take totally over. Then also, if you look at various marketing materials, various Telegram channels, again, pro-Russian people of Russian origin in Russia talking about that, then it's a highly prestigious choice to fight for the Wagner Group and private military. So The initial composition of the Wagner group was that Prigoshan has recruited a lot of criminals from the prisons, and then gave them an option to serve, and if they served it correctly and survived, then they are free men to go. But there's a limit to what he can do and how many men he could basically muster. And at that stage, the Wagner group was about between 6,000 and 8,000 men. Now, according to Prigoshan, he has about between 30,000 and 40,000 men on the Bakhmut front. And most of them are actually volunteers. And it has recently even been announced that the son of Dmitry Peskov, the spokesman for Putin, his son actually fought for the Wagner group as an artillery soldier, and he was very proud to fight for Wagner group. So fighting for these types of groups exposes you to an elite or a so-called well-known unit. So if you are fighting for them, then you have a lot of prestige because they are well-known, and if they are successors, then that reflects on you, and that is I believe, a core reason why certain Russians volunteer for military service. If you look at the structure from how Russian society has developed since the Second World War, you can only have to look at the Victory Day parades and patriotism and stuff like that, defending the motherland as being a core principle indoctrinated in the youth of Russia. And that's why they volunteer and feel they have to defend their homeland. Now, my opinion as well is that Bakhmut has a battle now for 10 months, or 12, 11 months, whatever you want to call it. Mostly fought by the Wagner group. But on the other side, you have the general narrative that this is a meat grinder. Supposed to be to systematically destroy the Ukrainian army and equipment. But on the other hand, you have the Wagner group advancing to Bakhmut or surrounding some Bakhmut and entering it from the one side and the other side and so on. And then progress is slowing through the Bakhmut. And that is actually contrary to what the general narrative is and the objective of the Russian military. The Russian military, is, according by the definition of the basic principles of attrition, is that the Russians set up their artillery systems, and then they wait defensive positions, and then they wait for the Ukrainians to attack and enter the killing fields, and then they bombard them, and that's how they destroy it. So it's basically, as a defensive unit, allowing forcing the enemy to advance and to progress. And that was quite effective. Well, that is what we are being told being effective, where a lot of Ukrainian soldiers have lost their lives, or and equipment was lost, and basically it was very effective on the destruction of the Ukrainian army. And that was the Russian military strategy. Or that is the narrative that we are being told. But on the other side, we see the Bakhmut advancing, trying to conquer Bakhmut. If they are able to conquer Bakhmut, that would be a huge, prestigious event for Prigoshan and for the Wagner group. And one has to ask yourself is, well, really the reason why these 35 men have died. Now, if you don't have enough ammunition, Prigoshan, and you cannot support your men, then you don't attack or you fall back. And that is not what happened. He advanced, not making sure that he has enough ammunition or cover fire whatsoever. Why? Because he started to make mistakes, because his men are exhausted, he's exhausted, and they want the prestigious event of conquering Bakhmut. At that stage, the rumor was that Wagner Group has occupied about 90% of Bakhmut. And when he went on and so on, Prigoshan actually threatened that his troops will be retreat by the 10th of May. And soon after that, Kadyrov said he will take over from Bakhmut, from Prigozhin and the Wagner Group. And the Chechens will finish the battle for Bakhmut. Now, we also know that Kadyrov is also prestigious orientated. So if the Chechens then conquered Bakhmut, then the glory will go to them. And they will say, but they finished what the Wagner Group couldn't do. And as soon as that said us, right, there were some developments in the Russian military. Prigozhin was given all the information, all the ammunition that he needed. And then they are still battling to regain or to occupy the rest of the city, the last 5 or 10%. So Wagner Group wants the glory of conquering Bakhmut. And that is the driving one. So Prigozhin is just as guilty as anybody else. Now, didn't they have enough ammunition? That's a big question. Now, I can always understand that, you know, the military is a huge beast. It's complicated. Logistics are the main problems. There are egos in the command structure. People also make mistakes. There are priorities set by certain generals and so on, like the build-up of ammunition for the supposed Ukrainian counteroffensive and whatever you want. You can think about many excuses why there wasn't enough ammunition. But my point is still that the buck race was Prigozhin. But there was some information made available. And I just want to say that from the data, documents provided by the Russian MOD, that states between March and April of this year, the Wagner Group received about 55,000 rounds of 122 millimeter, about 40,152 rounds, 160 pieces of laser-guided Krasnopol artillery rounds, and a hell of a lot of other things. And if you think about this and you break it down, then you get about 75,000 regular howitzer rounds, 155 to 122. And basically, if you go per week, they have about 9,400 per week, and it's about 1,300 per day. So surely, firing 1,300 rounds of a 122 or 155 or 152 is not a small amount. That is quite a significant amount of rounds. And one has to think of, remember, this is a battle of attrition, number one, and a battle of the artillery pieces. So the strategy usually is that you fire your 10 or 15 shots, and then you have to pack up and quickly move to a new position to prevent the counter artillery fire destroying yourself. So it's not about standing in, you line up 10 artillery pieces and you shoot one after the other, boom, 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 like 2 rounds a minute or something like that. That's not how it works. But commonly, all soldiers never have enough ammunition. And if I want to make I can put this sort of a number on that. And that is if you can fire every cannon that you have 24 hours, 7 days in a week, at the maximum rate of fire that cannon can handle. Then you have enough ammunition. But that would be a little bit impractical. And really, what's the purpose? You will just fire into empty areas where there is no enemy and just waste ammunition. So as you can see, there was no real shortage of, how do you call it, artillery rounds and so on. Then the Wagner Group didn't use it properly. And the funny thing about this whole story is also that, you know, when you read these reports, and you read the reports, like I said, you can read it on the Russian Telegram channels. You can read it from Russian media, Russian commentators. There's good translations available. Like I said, Firefox is a nice translator add-on. And if you do Telegram channels inside Firefox, you can read the Russian commentators very nicely. So you get it from the horse's mouth. You can see it. And what did I want to say? Oh yeah, the point here is that usually they say, okay, well, let's take the example of the counteroffensive Ukrainians in the Kharkiv area, or the withdrawal from Kherson. And what were we told always? No, that's not a withdrawal. That's not a retreat. That's a tactical withdrawal. The Russians are not pushing for area. They are not focused on conquering ground, etc., etc. They don't want to lose men. They rather would retreat into defensive positions and then let the enemy advance, then do a semi-counter-offensive with artillery rounds and annihilate the enemy. That is what we were told is the Russian strategy. Remember? That is what we've always been told. But so how is it then possible that the Wagner group is reported to each day advance 100 or 150 meters? But think about this. 100 to 150 meters advancing each day. What type of military strategy is that? Isn't it counter to what the stated Russian military strategy is? And if you don't have enough ammunition, you don't advance. Isn't that correct? So what is the purpose of the Bakhmut-Wagner conflict, Ukrainians? I don't understand. It goes against, precisely, it goes against the doctrine, the Russian strategy, doctrine, whatever you want to call it. And that is why these private military groups are so important to the Russian military. It creates prestige, it creates unity, it draws soldiers and patriots, and it does things that the normal army can't do, or is not prepared to do. Why? Because also of the internal structure of these private military. I'm sure that the discipline or the ranking system, or whatever you want, the strictness of a military is not the same in these private military groups. It's not a question of yes sir, yes sir, yes sir. There's other more relaxed, more things, but everybody knows for what he's fighting. You don't have to force a soldier to discipline and do attack. These guys, you can tell them do the attack because that is what they volunteered for. So, by the way, as far also, it seems to me that Prigoshan has also more or less described that there's about 40,000 Wagner groups, or 30,000 Wagner group soldiers in Bakhmut, and they're fighting about 35,000 Ukrainian troops, and about a total of 80,000 around Bakhmut, which quite amazes me in that respect, because as far as I understand it from Google and so on, Bakhmut had a population of 77,000 before the war. And now you have already added Ukrainians and the Wagner group to 70,000 in the same city and in the same housing structures. And you have to ask yourself the proximity of these forces. And, you know, this is a high concentration of forces in a very small area. And no wonder artillery then plays a big role, but I'm a little bit skeptic about these numbers. These are just too much. Doesn't make sense putting in 30,000 troops into a city of where the population was double that. That's too high a concentration, especially if you subject each day by artillery rounds. But be that as it may, Prigoshan has been promised all the ammunition. So I believe the bottleneck that developed and a little bit of bureaucracy that prevented him with the necessary artillery ammunition was resolved. Shuriken was appointed as the general now controlling the Wagner group. I'm not totally sure to what type of level or aspects, but he has been appointed. And then there was also, what was the guy's other name? Colonel General Mikhail Mazintsev. Oh. He was, in any case, the Deputy Minister of Defense for Logistics for the Russian command. This Colonel General Michael Mazintsev. Well, he was recently released of his post and basically fired. Well, he was responsible for logistics. And then a couple of days later, they saw him, he joined the Wagner group as the logistical officer. Something like that. Yeah. So he was fired by the Russian army and now he works for the Wagner group. And in logistics. So let's see how it develops. But this is not as straightforward as, this whole affair is not as straightforward as it seems. I don't see the same discipline and so on force on the Wagner group and Prigoshan. He is tolerated to a good extent because the Wagner group does fulfill a very important part of this conflict. And I believe the Russian command has been a little bit more liberal and not as strict as it usually was. I believe there is a change in the type of Russian command structure and what they can do, what they can't do, and how things work and so on. Because I believe that the structure was at the beginning of SMO, and a lot of personal errors were made by these commanders, and that led to unnecessary casualties in the Russian army. And therefore, it necessitated a reshuffle and a rethink of the military command structure in the Russians. But that is only speculations and a personal view based on a lot of small hints here and there, everywhere, etc., etc. But Prigozhin is also responsible for the death of those 35 men because of their own eagerness and their own seek for glory and prestige. And it was unnecessary. So that is my story for today. I thought I'd give you my own opinion on the matter. It is a little bit late, but you know we have load shedding and that unfortunately delays me in making certain videos. So, until next time then. Cheers.